welcome to Online Worship. I am Sarah Rugenstone, the Clayton site pastor. It is such an honor to be with you in this way today. If you have not done so already, please be sure to like our channel as well as subscribe to it and turn on every single notification that we have. That way you don't miss a single thing that we put here on our channel. Also, you're gonna see some links. There is a link to our church website that just gives you a little bit more information about the gathering, the ministries we do here, as well as our staff. We will also have a link to give. That's one of our shared practices here as a church. And so we're grateful when you participate in our church in that way. So thank you. You're also gonna see a link to connect. That will help you get further plugged in here at the gathering. So be sure to fill out that connect card. And also, I am very excited to say that we are kicking off our Advent series, which is called Peace. And if you're wondering a little bit about Advent and what that is, it's a season of waiting and preparation for Jesus and the light that is to come. So this week, we are talking all about peace in our world and maybe what that can look like. So if you like this message, be sure to share it with a friend. Go in peace.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the gathering. Thank you so much for being in worship, and I hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving. We did. We had to host at the Miofsky household, and it was awesome. But then, just like that, we are in the Christmas season. In the church, we call this Advent. It's the Christmas season leading up to Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and I'm going to start off with just a little bit of vulnerability with you. I'm going to describe some things that are just true about me. I'm able to admit it. Maybe for some of you, this rings true about you as well. Like, I am a person that sometimes gets worked up about insignificant things. I can dwell too long on things that I'd rather just be able to let go of. I can get frustrated sometimes with people that I just want to get along with. I look at the state of our world, a world that seems really broken and messed up, and I can get kind of cynical that anything could ever change. All of these things are true about me, and sometimes when I'm stressed out or when things get really busy, these tendencies get even worse in me. And so with all that as background, I read the Christmas story way early in the year, kind of thinking about what it is that we would focus on together in church. Now, I've preached on this story for 25 years. The story hasn't changed, but every time I read it, I'm different. And this year, with all that I just described as background, there was a part of the story that just hit differently for me. I saw this word in the story, and I thought, that's what I want. That's what I need. That's what I actually crave in my life. And that thing is peace. Peace. I mean, peace is, after all, the central promise of Christ's birth. I mean, if you go all the way back to Isaiah, when he was prophesying about the Messiah, he said that the Messiah would be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. When Jesus was born, remember the angel's announcement to the shepherds, and then through the shepherds to the whole world. It ended with glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth, peace to those whom God favors. Peace. And for me, this year, I looked at that and I said, I think I need that, but I don't think I'm alone. I think you need it. I think we need it together. And so over the next few weeks leading up to Christmas, I want to explore how is it that Jesus can bring us peace. And we're going to explore it at all different levels. We're going to start with the big on the world stage. How does Jesus bring peace to our world, our country, our communities? We're going to move down to relationships. How can Jesus bring peace to our relationships and our family? How does Jesus bring peace to our inner being? Because I know a lot of us are seeking that inner peace. And how does Jesus bring peace to our relationship with God? But today I'm going to start with what I think is probably the hardest thing to talk about in church, and that is, how does Jesus bring peace to our world? But then I was thinking, world peace, like, I'm good, but I'm not that good. That's like beyond my ability, above my pay grade. I'm not sure I can solve world peace, but I do think it's important for us today to explore how can the Christmas story, how does Jesus' birth bring peace to divided communities, to what I think all of us recognize as like a really divided country that we live in right now. And so today we're going to jump into that, but I'm going to start with the definition, because the word peace in the Bible, in Hebrew, doesn't just mean like a lack of conflict. Sometimes we think of peace that way, but peace is not only a lack of conflict, but peace means wholeness or completeness or a healed state. Peace isn't just a lack of bad things, but it's the presence of really good things. And I think part of the fatigue that I was describing earlier is that I look sometimes at our communities and our country, and due to differences in politics and cultural perspectives and theology and values and beliefs, it just seems like division is running rampant. That we're so often not living in a state of peace, of wholeness, of healing, of completeness, but instead in this state of brokenness and division. I mean, after all, we live in a really big, diverse country. Even our own city and communities, even our church is diverse. And diversity can either exist in division or it can exist in unity. And right now, it just feels like more than, at least at any other point in my life, our differences are dividing us rather than uniting us. Happens throughout churches, in our city, in our communities, and of course in our country. And so how is it that Jesus and the birth of Jesus can bring peace and offer us a path to peace when it comes to these divisions? Well, first, I think Jesus brings peace through humility. Through humility. You know, there are two kinds of power in the world. Power over and power with. Power expressed through force and power that can be expressed through humility. And you can't read the Christmas story without noticing the way that it's contrasting these two kinds of power. Power through force, power through humility. The way of Jesus and the way of the world, symbolized in a story about Caesar. Let me share a little bit of background. You know, the hope for a Messiah really started 500 years before Jesus was born. When the kingdom of Israel was conquered, when their land was lost, when their capital city Jerusalem was destroyed, the temple was torn down, the people of Israel believed that one day God would send a king, send a Messiah who would restore them to their freedom. But for centuries, they had been ruled by other people who had power over them. It was the Babylonians and the Greeks, and then finally the Romans or Caesar. By the time Jesus was born, the people believed that God would send a Messiah who would finally defeat Caesar, conquer Caesar, beat Caesar at his own game. And so the Christmas story begins with that hope, but the Christmas story doesn't do what people would expect. The people expected a Messiah like Caesar, but the Christmas story tells us about a Messiah who couldn't be more different than Caesar. Instead of the same, you get this contrast, and you see it just in the story that we read every year in Luke, that it begins in those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus, Caesar Augustus, who lives in a palace. Meanwhile, Jesus is born in a stable. Caesar gives royal decrees to important people. Jesus has angels speaking to the least important people in the world, shepherds. I mean, Caesar is clothed in royal robes. Jesus is pictured as swaddled in barnyard cloth. Caesar is in the most important city in the world, Rome. Jesus is born in a small, insignificant place, Bethlehem. And the contrast is clear. Caesar represents power one way through force, but Jesus, just through his birth, demonstrates something different, a deep humility. And I think the message underneath that is this, that more force, more Caesar is not going to solve the problems of the world. But instead, only humility can disarm hostility. Only humility can bring peace. And I was thinking about how much I think we still need to hear that 2,000 years later today. When I look at our country, for example, I think to myself, we need less Caesar and more Jesus. Less force and more humility. And yet, when I think about our differences, just differences on the community level, differences in our country, I think that we instinctively continue to try to to play out the power of Caesar. I want you to think about that. I mean, we want to lecture more than we want to listen. We want to win more than we want to understand. We want to impose our opinion and will rather than compromise with people that are different than us. We think strength is about always being right, when strength is actually about maybe admitting sometimes that you're wrong and changing. Continually, I see leaders play out the instincts of Caesar instead of the instincts of Jesus. And of course, I can't change like what our leaders do on a national stage, but we don't have to mimic it or buy into it. I think we can model something different. We can model the humility that Jesus brings. You know, over the past several months, we were doing this Much Given, Much Expected initiative. And over that time, I met with more people in the church one-on-one than I have met with in probably 5 years. I mean, I had tons of meetings every week with so many of you. And I learned something that I knew instinctively, but that it was really refreshing to sort of experience, and that is that we are a big, diverse church. I mean, right here at the gathering. We have so much diversity. We have people with different perspectives and opinions, different theology, who grew up in different religious traditions. We have people who vote differently and think differently and see different solutions to the world's problems. I mean, we have so much diversity right here. And in my conversations, I really tried hard to do something that I don't think we do enough of. When I sat down with so many people, even people who saw things really differently from me, I just tried to listen more than I tried to talk. I tried to understand their perspective more than I tried to explain my perspective. I said, I'm sorry several times to some of you, or I hadn't thought of that, or, thank you for that perspective. I want to take that more into account. I thanked people for sharing with me not only their dreams and hopes for the church, but their hurts and fears about the church. I asked them to consider mine as well. And the result was something really surprising. That even some people where I might have sat down and there might have been differences of opinion or perspective or thought about the future direction of where the church should go or what God cares most about, I found that these conversations just led to a greater sense of togetherness, a greater sense of unity. Humility is how diversity leads to community and not division. And I think we actually practice that here at the gathering. Friends, Jesus brings peace by actually confronting the way of Caesar, not by mimicking it. It's his humility that disarms the hostility that we see in the world. And I think for so many of us, beginning to adopt more humility, especially as we relate to people who are very different from us, is one way that Jesus begins to push back against the divisions that we see in our community and country. There's a second way that I think Jesus' birth brings peace. And that is by crossing lines that we are told not to cross. There's this old adage that says the easiest way to rule over people is to keep them divided. Divided by geography or culture, values, money, class, ethnicity, color, whatever it is. If you keep people separate and then you make them believe that other people are actually the enemy, it's the easiest way to rule over a group of people. And we live in a world that has adopted, I would say has perfected that strategy. I mean, think about it, from politics to news to neighborhoods to social media to church to schools, we are divided. And then we're made to believe that the people over there are actually our enemy instead of our siblings. I mean, we do that locally with the city and the county. We do that with rural and urban, Democrat, Republican. We do it with the rich and the poor, people of color, white working class people. I mean, whatever it is, we connect with people like us. And then we usually caricature and stereotype the people who are not like us. But in the midst of a world that wants to do that so much, Jesus does something powerfully different from that. Jesus comes and he crosses the lines that we are told not to cross. I mean, it is impossible to read the promise of the angels without remembering who the angels gave that promise to. Remember, it wasn't religious people, it wasn't ruling class people, it wasn't important people. It was actually the least important person you could think of, a shepherd. I've taught on the shepherds before. I mean, shepherds were not just the lowest rung of the socioeconomic ladder. They were not just poor. These were guys without options, but they were also seen as shifty, as kind of shady, as people that you wouldn't want to be around. And yet, that's the person. Those are the people that the angels decided to make the promise to first. And of course, this just was kind of foretold what Jesus would do his entire life. Jesus was constantly crossing lines to interact with people that he just was not supposed to interact with. I mean, think about the story. I mean, Jesus, don't go over there. Those are lepers. They live out there for a reason. And yet Jesus went there. Or Jesus, why do you sit down and eat with sinners and tax collectors? We're not supposed to hang out with them. Or she's a prostitute. Or Jesus, no, that's a Samaritan. Or that's a Gentile. Or those are children. Or that's a woman. Jesus, why are you connecting with rich people or with criminals? I mean, over and over and over again. Jesus was a boundary-busting, kind of line-crossing guy. And just consider for a moment what it might look like for us to do more of that. Who is on the other side, whatever the sides are, from where you are? And what would it look like for you to engage them? I don't know how many of you follow politics very much, but a couple of weeks ago, you might have heard that President Trump and the new mayor-elect of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, had this big meeting at the White House. And I mean, people were just waiting for this meeting, expecting it. Here are these two polar opposite guys. They were expecting it to be full of conflict and theater. And I think almost everyone were surprised when they came out, having not fought near as much as people imagined. Almost seeming to get along a little bit. And what I thought was really funny is that there were actually people on both sides mad that they didn't fight with each other more than they did. They were mad that they seemed to get along. They were mad that they didn't dislike each other more. And yet, I can't help but think that peace begins when we refuse to hate the people that the world tells us to hate. Jesus constantly crossed lines in order to break down the things that divided. And I think that we have something to learn, that peace might come in our communities and in our country if we had a little bit more willingness to cross lines as well. And then finally, Jesus brings peace by lifting up the lowly. By lifting up the lowly. When Mary's pregnant, she bursts out in this song that has become famous now. We call it the Magnificat. But the song is not really a lullaby. It's more like this song of revolution about what Jesus is doing in the world. I want you to listen to just a part of that song. Mary says, he has pulled the powerful down from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He's filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty-handed. Jesus' birth is God's way of lifting up the lowly and bringing down the powerful. In other words, it's God's way of creating a level playing field where God is God and people are just people. It overcomes the divisions of the rich and the poor and the hungry and the well-fed, the powerful and the vulnerable. It recognizes this inequity that we create in this world, and it says that through Jesus, God straightens all of that out. And friends, it's impossible to read the prophecies about Jesus or the life that Jesus lived and not see this theme that God is constantly trying to address the inequity that God sees in the world. We call this, by the way, different names. Sometimes it's called justice, sometimes it's equity, sometimes it's righteousness, which means just making things right. Sometimes it's talked about through imagery, like making the mountains low and the valleys lifted up so there's a level plain. But just listen to some of the ways that the Messiah's coming is described in the Old Testament. For example, Isaiah in chapter 9 says, there will be vast authority and endless peace, establishing and sustaining it with justice and righteousness, now and forever. Or later on in Isaiah, he will judge the needy with righteousness and decide with equity for those who suffer. Or in Psalm 72, let him judge your people with righteousness and your poor ones with justice. Let the mountains bring peace to the people. One of the Psalms says that in the Messiah, righteousness or justice and peace kiss. I mean, Mary's song wasn't out of left field. The Messiah, Jesus, brings peace by bringing a sense of equity and justice and fairness to a world that is fundamentally unjust and unfair. And in the Bible, I mean, this isn't just spiritual stuff. They're talking about the real things that keep us separate from one another, primarily economic when the Bible is talking about it. It primarily talks about the rich and the poor, the powerful and the people who don't have any power, but it extends to religion and social differences and ethnic division. Whatever divides people has to be addressed. The lowly have to be lifted up. Those who have too much have to be brought down. And peace comes when we put ourselves on a level playing field with everyone else and we see in each other a common humanity. And so I think if we're honest about Christmas, if we want to engage Christmas honestly, then we have to think about what that message might mean for us. At a simple level, I think it means that we are called to care about the injustices and inequities that we see in our country right now. We're called at a fundamental level at least to notice it and to care about it. You know, I was listening to an interview recently, and it was about the healthcare conversation and how expensive healthcare is getting. Without subsidies now, healthcare is skyrocketing for certain people who don't have access to it, maybe through work. And, you know, they were doing an interview, and when asked about it, one leader said, well, that's their problem about people whose health care was going up. And I thought to myself, I mean, whatever you think, whatever your politics are, I mean, peace can never be possible if that's our attitude about other people. Against a backdrop, I think, where words like justice and equity are becoming more and more partisan and political, we have to see that those words are actually fundamentally religious words. They're at the heart of the Christmas story. And in a world where the economic mountains and valleys are getting sharper and steeper, not more level, we have to ask, is this the world that God imagines? In a country where there's plenty of wealth to solve the problems that we have, and yet we choose not to solve them, we have to at least wonder if there's a different way. In a world where we just sort of assume that injustice and these inequities are just part of what it means to be alive, we have to ask, is there something, a different way that God calls us to live? We have to at least care about the injustices and the inequities in the world. And I fear sometimes that we're moving in the opposite directions, where conversations about equity are actually being banned, where we don't want to talk about the great gap between people who have and people who don't. We need to reclaim these ideas, not as partisan politics, but as religious concepts, things that Jesus cares deeply about, and Jesus demands that we address if we want authentic peace. Part of the reason that peace eludes us is because we're unwilling to deal with the inequities and the injustices. But Jesus says that if you want peace, we have to lift up the lowly. We have to lower the proud, and we overcome division by leveling out the inequities of this world. Jesus does that work, and I think calls us to participate in it as well. You know, the Christmas story is full of the promise that Jesus can actually address the divisions that we see in our community, in our country, in our world. But Jesus does it in a really unexpected way, with humility, by crossing lines, by lifting up the lowly. And I think part of taking the Christmas story seriously is asking ourselves, you know, God, how do we begin to participate in that work? Part of actually celebrating Christmas is actually following Jesus in that work. And so, friends, that's what I want to ask you to consider this week. How can you begin to do that? How can you begin to address the divisions that we see around us? The stuff that I know so many of us are frustrated about and wish didn't exist. How can you begin to address it? By choosing a path of humility. Not power by force, but this power through a humility of listening and learning. How can you pursue this by not hating the people that the world tells you to hate, but instead crossing some lines every once in a while to actually interact with the people that you don't? How can you participate in this work by doing your part to see and address the injustices that might be right around you? That's the Christmas that Jesus comes to bring. And as I think it's one that can offer us hope and fundamentally peace as well. Will you pray with me? Gracious and holy God, I'm so grateful that Christmas is not just sentimental, but it offers us, Jesus offers us real peace, but it's not easy peace. And so God, this week, help us to take this part of the story seriously. Help us to think about what it might look like in our own lives to adopt the humility of Jesus, to cross the kind of lines that Jesus would want us to cross, to begin to see and address the injustices right around us. So God, help us to start our celebration and our preparation of Christmas in this way. And through us, God, may we begin to bring more of your peace to our community, to our city, maybe even to our country and to our world. We pray for these things in the name of the one who is called the Prince of Peace, Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. For more than 13 years, The Gathering has come together every Christmas Eve to do something that I think is remarkable. We give away 100% of our offering. Every dollar has gone to build wells in Mozambique, where access to clean and safe water is still a daily struggle. We've helped to dig and repair hundreds of wells, and as a result, children are healthier, schools are thriving, and villages grow. But the story doesn't end there. As access to safe water has increased, new needs have emerged. Our partners in Mozambique, people that we know and trust, have asked for help addressing a new and urgent challenge: the health of mothers and babies. In so many areas, women walk miles for prenatal care or give birth without access to safe facilities or trained medical help. Infant and maternal mortality rates are still way too high. And so this year, The Gathering's commitment to Mozambique is evolving. We're still going to give away 100% of our Christmas Eve offering, but this year, your gifts will fund and build a mother and infant health center in Kambini. This is going to be a place where women can receive care, where babies can be born safely, where families can begin to thrive for generations to come. This new chapter, I think, is the next faithful step in our commitment to practice Christmas differently and to give a gift this time of year that truly matters. The wells we built gave life. Now we get to give a gift that will help sustain life. Building this center, I also think, is just an incredible way to celebrate the birth of Jesus and to honor him by giving a gift that helps mothers and newborns today. So as the Christmas season begins, before you get all caught up in the present buying and the party planning, I'm going to ask you to do once again this year what I've asked you to do in the past. let's begin praying right now about the Christmas Eve offering. Consider how you might buy a little less this year. Spend less money on those gifts that we give to each other, gifts that we often don't even remember, gifts that don't necessarily make a difference. And instead, let's use that money to give a gift on Christmas Eve that will matter, one that will bring hope, health, and new life to mothers and children in Mozambique.